This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment mentor for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Episode 102. If you find yourself often overwhelmed and stressed out, I encourage you to go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/end-overwhelm and watch my workshop on the 5 shifts to end overwhelm and live a more balanced and connected life as a highly sensitive woman entrepreneur. Now here is today's episode. Well, welcome, sisters. Oh, I am excited about my next guest because we are going to talk about the brain and how it works for the HSPs. My guest today is Esther Bergsma, and she is a frequent speaker on high sensitivity in the Netherlands. She is an author, a trainer, scientific researcher, and expert on high sensitivity. She wrote a book, which I'm going to have her actually pronounce. It's called The Highly Sensitive Children. And Esther, would you pronounce it in Dutch?
In Dutch, it's hoogsensitieve kinderen.
Beautiful. Which included research amongst over 700 parents and the book Highly Sensitive Brain, but that is also in Dutch. Esther wants to create awareness about the trait from a much more scientific angle. She speaks for medical professionals, psychologists, teachers, and managers. Last year, she conducted international research to gain awareness on the trait of high sensitivity in the workplace, which is awesome. Over 5,500 highly sensitive persons from over 20 countries participated, and the results are as important for the HSPs as for their employers. Esther wants to connect you through her website, which I'm going to give in the show notes at the end, as a place for HSPs to meet, learn, and share. So Esther, I just want to say thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for inviting me, Nicole.
Well, share a little bit with the ladies who are listening, like what really got you into doing some of this research about the brain and especially in the workplace and all of that for HSPs?
Well, I was trained to be a scientific researcher when I went to college. And after that, I worked for the Ministry of Social Affairs doing scientific research. I just made some promotions and I became a manager. Then I moved to another place to be a manager over there, but I got into a burnout. And it lasted 4 years. So and after those 4 years, I wasn't really that much recovered that I could work for a boss. I thought, well, when I'm going to do that, I will be back to basis again. So I started my own practice. And in this period, I discovered I was highly sensitive. And all kind of highly sensitive people came to me in this coaching practice of mine. And when I talked to them, I realized how little we know about the trait. So I thought to myself, well, I am a scientific researcher. Why not take that into this? So I started different projects just to gain more insight in the trait. And that's what I did with my first book. I asked over 700 parents just to share their experiences with their children in the day-to-day struggles.
Beautiful. And I love how you actually went to the source. You had so many people from the first book to now your brain book. How many people responded and gave you more information so that you could put it together and then share it in a different way for everybody else to read it. And yeah, for those, especially in your country, of just like, I want more information. Why is this going on? How is this different? So that's beautiful.
Yeah. For my brain book, I put together information from different scientific articles. I integrated all my own research, but that's just about the experiences of people. So I'm not a brain researcher. I haven't done any MRI scans, but what I have done is take together all the scientific information that is present about the highly sensitive brain and about a brain functioning from general. And I've tried to make it into a model, so it's much easier to understand what's going on in your brain. So all the things you find difficult in your day-to-day life are just a bit more comprehensible.
Beautiful. And I thank you so much for that clarification. Like, no, you don't do all the scans of the brain and
No.
things like that, but based on the information, why it is different for us HSP. So would you share a little bit about how HSP's brain really, how they experience the stress? I mean, I know, like you're saying, I've experienced burnout myself, not for 4 years like you, but it's like, I know that is a common theme for many HSPs, like the grind of doing things and overwhelm, and that's the constant. So share a little bit like how our brain is different regarding stress and all of that.
I'll try to summarize it because it's. I just tell something about the main differences, and perhaps we can tune into some interesting differences a bit more. So when we look at the way we process information, it's about noticing, processing, and responding to information. And on those three different forms, we see differences. So in noticing, we know that highly sensitive people notice stimuli that come from our senses. So the hearing, taste, smell, light, all those senses are not in everyone, but most HSPs have one or two senses that are really sensitive, and we notice those subtleties that others don't. But what's the most important thing for HSPs is that we notice those emotional stimuli. So when what other people feel, what other people experience, we pick up on those things. And that is what we see in the brain research, that the areas that are connected to this process are activated much more than for not highly sensitive people. So noticing is stronger. So noticing is the first step. Then the processing, there's a lot to tell about the processing, but the main things are that we activate more brain areas at the same time. So there is more connectivity in the brain, and we combine information, and we the most important thing is that we are really focused on what is the important thing for our group. So we're not focused on what's best for me, but what's best for the group I'm in.
We're all about harmony and inclusion.
Absolutely. So it's a lot of different brain areas that are active, but that gives us so much information about a lot of things that we're encountering day to day. And the last one is that responding is different for highly sensitive people. And that's about we experience more stress in the same situation as a non-highly sensitive person. We experience emotions more deeply. Not only the negative, but also the positive. And we have a really strong developed self-reflection. So when we have responded, the first thing we do is think about, have we done it right, or should we have done it differently?
Yeah. We were having a little bit of this conversation before I hit record.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, those are the things that are different for the HSP brain.
Well, you talked about, I know in some of your blog posts that I have read about, well, we're going to tap a little more into like the perfectionism and the overwhelm that happens with this. In those blog posts, you had made a comment on, like, again, we notice things around us. So like if you're in a work situation and you see a colleague who's struggling with, I don't know, let's say a report, like at the end of the day, you may ask to kind of help out or, stay and to get it done. And that can be part of what generates our stress is because we're not setting up those boundaries, because we truly do want the best for others.
Mm-hmm.
And we forget ourselves in that care process
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. You also talk a little bit about, in some of your research that you've done, what you called the optimal option ambition and how that really relates to perfectionism. Would you share just a little bit more about like what does that mean and how we can truly get in our own way when we are in that perfect mindset?
Yeah. The optimal option ambition is summarizing term to clarify what goes on in our brain when we are in different situations. What's really remarkable is that we activate different brain areas, such as the anterior cingulate cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex, the insula, which are all brain regions that are really focused on the me-other interaction in different ways. And we activate those areas even when it's not really necessary. So it's our primal response to any situation. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we also are activating the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is a brain area that's stimulating us to do something. When we see something, we want to do something, and we want to do it immediately. And we also know that this brain area is really about doing the right thing. So when we see something with others, and we can see something because we have the ability to really notice what goes on in other people. That activates the brain areas that focuses on what is best for the group, what is best for getting us included. And it activates our desire to act. So without us even consciously knowing it, we just do the thing that we think is best for this situation. And if you're not aware of this, you will neglect your own needs and your own time for rest, for example, just because it's not in your system. And that's the dangerous part, because all tasks we do cost us more energy because we process everything so deeply. It takes more stress, it takes more energy. So we need more rest, and at the same time we are wired to take up the extra responsibility.
So how is a person, an HSP, how are they to go about finding that beautiful, I don't like the word balance, harmony, when they discover like, wow, I'm going to the edge of burnout here. I don't want to go there. What would help them, I guess, kind of start to learn what works for their true system? I know, and everybody listening, everybody's kind of got their own different range on what works and what doesn't. But what are some steps where they can find out, instead of getting into that perfectionism loop of trying to do everything right and overfunction in a way where they're trying to take on other people's things when it's not necessarily their responsibility? What are some steps they could do to begin to manage that differently?
Well, I think the very first step is understanding what's going on inside you. So why are you doing what you're doing? Because when you understand that, it's much easier to stop it, to find different ways to react. So when you notice that you are automatically stepping in for another, you are automatically wanting to take care of the other, even when you don't have any energy left, when you notice it, you can ask yourself, can I do this at this moment? Do I want to do this at this moment? Is it me who has to do this at this moment? So it gives you the opportunity to make it a conscious decision instead of an unconscious decision.
Yeah, I love that. That's a beautiful first step.
It's a first step, but it's an important third step, I guess. Oh, what I want to say about the empathy, because sometimes we get the feeling that, it's just very difficult to be an HSP. And we have all those difficult things we have to manage. But it's most of the time it's quality versus a pitfall. Is that how you say it? It's a plus and it's a minus at the same time.
Yep. Yeah.
For example, the empathy. Well, it's a beautiful trait to be able to really feel what others feel, to really understand the situation they're in. It's not given to everyone, so it's a beautiful trait. And at the same time, this empathy can also really give words and feelings to what you think the other might think about you.
Yeah.
So it can also be an extra push for you just to keep on going, not to take this break even when you need it, not to make a walk, but just stay in the office to finish a job, even when you know it's good for you. So this empathy has two sides. On the one hand, it's really a quality, and on the other hand, you can get too far in it, and it really limits your the ways in which you can take care of yourself.
I think you did a beautiful job when you were talking about, like, if you're doing a task, you're doing an activity, whether that's for yourself or somebody else, one, totally get curious, like, what's the kind of driving force behind that, and making sure it's a very conscious decision that you're doing it. Two, what I say is if you're in flow, meaning it feels very effortless, and let's say your alarm went off like, hey, it's time to take that small walk just to kind of get a break from the office or the tasks that you're doing and break up your day a little bit. But if you're in flow, instead of that interruption, it's like you keep going with it. It's what we're talking about is not that you're going to keep ignoring your own needs, that it's like sometimes it's like time limited, like, oh, I'm in this thing, I'm really loving what I'm doing, it's all feeling effortless, I can totally get this done now, and you get it done, and then you can go take that walk. But it's not ignoring your own needs every single time, because that does lead to burnout.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. Share a little bit more. I'm not sure I touched so much about this, that perfectionism piece. We know that we like to do things right. And typically HSPs do our own little research and thinking about things and pulling all kinds of information together. It turns out we're typically, right on what we do. We like to do things kind of once and be done with it. But how else does that negatively impact us, though, in how we think about things or how we exhaust ourselves when we get stuck in that perfectionism loop? Does that make sense?
Yeah, one of our talents, I guess, is that we are able to overview a lot of information. That's one of the brain areas that's activated more. And it means that we, where other just see the immediate consequence of a situation, we can take some steps further and think about what might happen if this or what might happen if that. That means that when we have a task to do, we also know what might happen if something goes wrong or if something is not entirely perfect, or for example, if we are in a subject, in a specific project, and we really understand how the different parts connect to each other, and we want to make this right, to make it really all perfect. Well, so our ability to have this overview makes that we are not satisfied with an easy solution. On top of that, we have this, what I said earlier, focus on the social group. So we also are tuning into what people expect from us, what people would want us to do. And we top that on our own standards. So it's pretty high what we think we have to do.
Yes.
And because of our focus on the social group, we are really afraid to be excluded more than others. And for example, one of the brain areas is the anterior cingulate cortex, which is also about feeling pain, physical pain, but also pain from social exclusion. And that's activated much more with HSPs than non-HSPs, which means that if there's a slight signal that we might be excluded, we are really feeling this emotion. And it's so painful, just as painful as physical pain. We want to avoid that. So that makes that, that's the reason why this perfectionism sometimes feels like being of life and death. Yeah.
Because we, as human beings, right, our nature is to want that connection. And then you add HSP traits on top of that wanting deep connections. And so then to think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be socially isolated or dismissed from the tribe, it does become like a life or death, the way of the mind going off in that sense of like, I'm going to be banished. Oh my gosh.
That's exactly what's going on in the brain. And it's also unconscious, so you don't even know you're doing it, but it drives your actions. And that's why this first step of really knowing what's going on is so important.
Well, and that goes back to that people-pleasing piece too, where it's like you're trying to do anything and everything for everyone else but yourself. And when you don't know you, or you don't know your HSP traits, you don't know that you're a highly sensitive person, it really can do you more damage, because this is what we're talking about, that perfectionism and the burning out and the overwhelm. It's like you're setting yourself up to truly fail. Because if you're stepping into people pleasing, I have to be liked by this person, I have to be included in the group, and yet their values don't align, the way they conduct themselves in the world goes against everything you ever do. It's like, no, let that one go. You can be acquaintance versus be like in the group type of thing.
Yeah. There are different things going on at the same time, because on the one hand, we want what you just described. And on the other hand, we are really disappointed when people are not doing the same thing back for us. Well, not the first 10 times, but the 11th and the 12th time, we are really disappointed. And we think, if this was friendship, what friendship is, well, no, it's not. But it's not just them. It's us as well, because we have a different perspective on how people should interact with one another and what is considered to be normal. On the other hand,
sorry, I'm so trying not to laugh, because I'm like, oh my word, over the years, I have so struggled with, I'm like, what? I'm doing that for them. What is that? And this is not about codependency. This is not about being enmeshed with somebody else, as we would say in like clinical terms. It is truly more about how we're wired and how we think about things. And like what you're talking about, though, is sometimes we need to actually ask and get clarification so that we're not left wondering.
It's so
like,
important.
What's going on.
And it's really good to ask for something you want, because other people don't read you like you read them. So they need this information about, could you please hold me for a minute? Or could you please just ask how my day was?
And again, I'm laughing not at the pain that can cause, but it's more of the pain that it's like, we think it's so obvious, and yet it's really not. And as I would say with clients that I've worked with over the years, it's like, no one can read your mind. That's whether you're an HSP or a non-HSP. So absolutely stating your needs is vital for any relationship, working or personal. And that way people know what it is you want and need. Now, they can totally not do it. That gives you information, but they're not going to be able to do it at all if you don't even ask.
Yeah. It's so important for HSPs to understand that their brain works differently from non-HSPs do, are from a very different perspective and can't be compared with what we would do.
Not at all. It's fascinating. Again, as you're saying this, like, oh man, if I would have known this information about 20 years ago, it would have saved a lot of heartache. But it is what it is, right? With friendships and love relationships, all those things, it's just like, oh, yeah, the things you don't know when you don't know it, and now you know it, and you're like, oh, well, going forward, I'm going to do that a little differently.
There's so many HSPs who are so disappointed, who feel so left out, or feel so sometimes even worthless because
Yeah.
they get their self-worth from the actions of others, and they get jump to conclusions which are not the right conclusions because the other people don't do this with our state of mind, but with their state of mind.
Yeah. I've talked about in other episodes, about staying in your own lane, and that is so true because if we weren't growing up, I'll speak for myself, growing up, if, not being felt like I was seen or heard or that I was such an individual, even though there was that in me, it went into that people pleasing and perfectionism route outside of being an HSP. It's like it had its own kind of characteristics and behaviors. Then gaining information like, oh, there is a part of me that goes towards that because I really do want harmony and I want inclusion. But there's a healthy way of having that balance or harmony without being detrimental to your own well-being.
Yeah.
And
there's some interesting research from Bianca Acevedo and colleagues about the effect of a positive childhood versus a negative childhood on the brain of HSPs. And from that research, we can conclude that HSPs who had a positive childhood, which just means that they have felt supported, they have felt seen and heard, they experience more rewards when they are in social situations, even from the negative ones. Well, when you are an HSP who has had a negative childhood, you don't experience this reward. So you only experience the negative feelings, and you feel those emotions more strongly. And at the same time, we also know that in that case of a negative childhood, you are a bit less good at self-regulation. So the brain areas that are activated to regulate what your body needs to do. So in this situation, your body needs to enhance the stress hormones, or has to speed up your blood pressure or heart rate. That's self-regulation on the inside. And on the other side, there's self-regulation on emotions. Well, those things are not as much developed when you have had a negative childhood. So that can explain a bit about you're not feeling capable of keeping yourself up in difficult situations, while HSPs with a positive childhood do have that feeling because they feel rewards even in bad situations, and they feel a kind of control in those situations.
Yeah. And just so ladies, you understand what Esther and I are talking about, it doesn't mean that you can't reverse these things, because you can.
Yeah.
What you've learned, you can absolutely unlearn. And so part of this, like what Esther said earlier, it really is pausing and doing that self-reflection. That's a big piece of this. When you gain more understanding of yourself, and I'm going to have another episode more on like personal development coming up, but this is also being able to have self-compassion. We talk about this in other episodes, or I've talked about this in other episodes. I know, Esther, you talk about that in your books as well, about that self-compassion piece and how it's so important. And the more that we learn to trust ourselves and the more actions that we take, your confidence begins to grow. And so you're not looking to everyone else outside of you to fill up you, and that you learn that you're enough with or without being included in these so-called groups. It's like, oh, I've got this. I can totally do this. And you keep learning.
Yeah, it's really important to know this, that it is possible to learn some of these skills that HSPs with a positive childhood have learned from the start.
And that's part of why, part of the work you're doing is helping other HSPs understand this. But also what I love about the work you're doing is you're helping non-HSP employers and employees understand the beauty of having sensitive colleagues in their workforce. and that how it can actually benefit the entire corporation. It can benefit other people in the organization as well. So I love that you're out there doing this work.
It's so important to know for the HSPs and the non-HSPs that those qualities are indispensable at the workplace. We need them. We need them to create a balance. All the things that have happened would perhaps not have happened when we would have appreciated the highly sensitive qualities a bit more. Because it's all about deliberation, about empathy, about really thinking things through. So I want to get the word out that we need everyone, and also that the HSP know that they have important qualities, so that they're not hiding themselves, just wanting to adapt and to be the same as everybody else. No, be your HSP. You're great. You're fantastic.
Exactly. And I know, again, in one of your blogs, you talked about one thing that really helps HSPs thrive. And again, this I think goes back to that stress level. Finding the optimal level for you is doing meaningful work. I mean, I've worked with some HSPs over the years that it's in all areas of work, right? There's HSPs somewhere. But I know for some, they were trying to take on this type of speed, and they did great depth work in the field they were in, but they were burning out because they were trying to keep up with colleagues. And then they would get bored because a different project would come down the pipeline and it wasn't for them. And you talk about finding something that has meaningfulness to you, and that will help kind of keep you moving forward and keep you up versus something that just bores you to tears, because that's a different level of stress right there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because we need some energy to get going, and everything we do takes more energy. And well, it's so the other side of the coin is that it takes more stress sometimes, but the other side of the coin is that you do your work more thoroughly. And from research, we know that you have better performance at your work. But well, it comes with a cost, and the cost is more stress. And to manage the stress, you really need to self-care, to take some really self-care steps. For example, mini breaks every couple of hours, or breathing exercises, or mindfulness, or yoga, or whatever helps you get the stress hormones down. But one thing you don't do, you should never do, is keeping up with the pace of your colleagues, because their brain works very differently. They don't need that much energy. So, of course, they can go on longer. But it's just so different. And so don't compare yourself to others.
Again, I'm going to pull from your blog that you did. So if this puts you on the spot, don't worry, I can read from your blog. I have it in front of me. But what are some tips for those who are listening, who are actual managers or leaders of others, and maybe they've now discovered, oh, this employee really is an HSP. What are some things they could do that would make it a much more positive environment to their HSP employees? Like, what would help them really set their team up for success?
Well, what's very important when you are managing HSPs is that you don't reward them by extra money or by flashy phones or cars or any material things. That's not what matters. What really matters for the highly sensitive employee is working in a pleasant atmosphere, to feel that there is trust, there's mutual respect, that there's no gossiping at the workplace. That's the top thing that's important for them. And when that's not okay, most of them, almost everyone, the highest percentage I got from my research, they even can't work. They're blocked in their functioning. So it's a really important aspect.
Yeah. You also talked about making sure that you're giving clear expectations and freedom as much as possible to do their job, which, like you just said, like instead of blocking them or not being clear what it is you want or need from them, that one is going to, for me, that would drain my energy, and then it would just cause me frustration. And so one, as an HSP, part of my job on my side of the road would be to ask, like, hey, am I understanding you want X, Y, and Z from this thing?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're on the manager side of it, making sure, you're trying to provide as clear expectations and directions with some flexibility in that for that person to do what they can do in their own creative way.
Yeah, exactly. Because an HSP is really creative in coming to solutions, and because they see more, they process it more deeply. So they've got more, elements to build a solution with. So they are much more creative when you just let them do their own thing, and you only have to say what you want as an outcome or what you want to have fixed, and just leave them do it in their own way.
Yeah, that again, I think is one of our gifts as HSP is to really think outside the box. And it's like you can come up some really incredible things. And like you're saying, really pull from all these different experiences or things in life that you've seen, you've heard, and what's going on in the company or your own business. And people are like, wow, that's really good. I'm like, oh, well, thanks. But you gave them space to be able to do that.
When an HSP is really restricted, so he has to do exactly this and exactly that, and the manager is really looking over the shoulder all the time just to to make sure everything is going all right, you will notice that the employee is really not in his comfort zone and will not be able to perform the best he can.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Esther, as we wrap up a little bit, you've given some beautiful information about how our brain does work differently and how we can, again, start to get curious about our own actions and mindsets and be able to shift that to something healthier for perfectionism and our people pleasers who are listening. What are some things that you do for your own self-care? Like, what are some of your own little rituals or routines that you do to make sure you are staying optimal for your level of stress and needs?
Well, one of the things that get in my way when I'm not focused on it is that I really feel the expectation of others. So everything we just talked about. So when I start my day with opening social media, with opening Facebook or Instagram, I get all this information from others, and I really feel I have a clouded head with all those expectations, all those other things that other people do and might want from me as well. So I would just want to start my day with opening what I'm doing and opening what I think is important and starting on that. So I feel really empowered by doing something I love. And when I have that feeling, it's okay to go on social media, but not before, because then I'm on. I noticed I'm drained. My energy is drained.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's important for me. And the other thing is that I need some breaks to read.
Yes. Like, it makes me smile. Like, a book.
Oh,
Yay.
yeah. It's one of my favorite moments when I get to read my book. So that's something I grant for myself. When before my burnout and during some of the years of my burnout, I didn't give myself permission to relax. I always thought, well, if I'm not able to do this, I can do something else that's just as necessary or productive. So I didn't want to waste any time doing things I just liked. It also had to be very necessary.
Those right there, my dear, are so incredibly important to emphasize, because again, it goes back to that perfectionism piece and like trying to keep up with non-HSPs. It's like, no. Yeah, it's like filling your energy bucket up, as the day begins versus depleting yourself from the very get-go?
So at this moment, when I feel I need to take a break, I can just take a break, and I will let myself take a break and enjoy it, because you can sit on the couch but really think to yourself, "Oh, I need a break again. Oh, I'm so weak. I shouldn't have to do this. Why I'm not like everybody else?" Well, I can tell you, you don't feel replenished after your break.
Right.
So I really let myself get this rest, or read my book, or do something I really like, and then I feel I have the energy, and at that moment I just feel, okay, what do I want to do now? Is it this difficult task, or is it something a bit more easier? I guess I can start with something more easier, just to get me started. So I'm much more kind to myself.
I love it. And again, this is all the unlearning you did over the years to learn, like, it's okay for me to embrace these sensitivities and to give myself permission to take a break, because I'm truly wired differently, and that's okay. So, I love it. I love it. And ladies, I will have all of Esther's social media links for Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram in the show notes. Her website, I'm going to spell it out so I don't butcher how to pronounce it, is HOOGSENSITIEF.NL. And again, I'm going to have that on the show notes. She also has a link that I'm going to put on there regarding the HSP and Burnout International research. She's got that, and she's got great blogs as well for you to read too. So Esther, I just want to say thank you again for coming on today, for doing the work that you're doing and helping raise awareness for how we can really not only set ourselves up to succeed as HSPs, but also those who are non-HSPs, how they can help those within their organization, in their company, to be the best leaders and people that they can be, because you're also setting them up to succeed. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, Nicole. I really liked our talk. Thank you.
To sign up for my workshop on the 5 shifts to end overwhelm and live a more balanced and connected life as a highly sensitive entrepreneur, go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/end overwhelm.